Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk all about investing 101. What are the basics? How do we be thinking about investing? And so we're actually going to break this into a two-part series. So stay tuned for the next episode on this. But this one today we want to break down is what are the actual account types that we need to be investing in? How do we diversify from what types of, how it's going to be taxed and the different accounts there? And then our next series we're going to be talking more about what are the actual underlying investing? What is a stock? What is a bond? How do we be thinking about risk when we're talking about portfolios and things like that? So stay tuned. We're excited to break this all down for you and keep it simple and not overcomplicated. So thanks for joining. And if this is your first time joining our series, welcome. My name is Michael Foley. I'm a certified financial planner and a certified student loan professional. And I'm also the son of two doctors, and I've really developed a lifestyle creep really to help serve the healthcare workers in our society and really help you to be more intentional in your money decisions by really simplifying the complex in this world of finances, of acronyms and all the fun stuff. So really want to break it down into some actionable steps for you. So welcome and thanks for joining. So let's dive into this. So when we're first talking about investing, everything you talk about is, all right, well, you got to be diversified, you got to not take too much risk, or you got to take too more risk. And I think the first thing that we have to be talking about before we actually even talk about investing is what types of accounts are you actually investing in, right? And so I think, it's really helpful to kind of break down the different types because we want to make sure that we're diversifying out that, how are these different investments that we're in, where's our money going? And then how is that money going to be taxed when it grows in those various accounts? And so we got to be very strategic with where we're putting that because arguably the types of accounts that your investments are in are equally, if not more important than the underlying investments themselves because the IRS is going to get their handful one way or another. And so let's make sure that we're spreading out the risk from how they're taking their handful out of your accounts as well. So, but when we're looking at a well-balanced financial plan, we want to make sure that we're kind of spreading our eggs into multiple baskets here, right? And so the first basket here, we really want four different categories, okay? So the first basket that we have, this is, we call this your cash bucket. And so that cash bucket might entail, you might have your emergency reserve, and we usually like to keep that in what we call a high yield savings account. And so these are some of these online accounts that are earning, pretty good interest rate right now. They're like in the 4%, 4 to 5% interest. Love that. And then we want some in our checking account, okay? So we usually like to see maybe about like one month's worth of expenses in your checking account. We like to see about 4 to 5 months worth of your expenses in your high yield savings account, okay? These are the accounts that we don't want to take any risk in, okay? Because if there's something that happens, you need access to money, this is where we go, right? So that's the first line of defense that we want. We like the high yield savings account because it can earn a little bit more interest than if just keeping it in our checking account, which we love, but we can't take any risk. So we're not going to want to invest that money. Being in a high yield savings account, we want to be with an FDIC insured bank. So we want to keep that very safe and secure. We don't want to have the possibility of losing money in that account, right? But when we do make money in this account, you're going to have to pay taxes on it. So we got to be thinking, we're getting about 4% or 5% growth on that, but you're actually having to add that interest to your earned income in this given year. So it's not as good as it sounds on paper, but it's definitely a heck of a lot better than that checking account. So we love to have that. And we also like a separation from that because oftentimes when we have a little bit of a separation with our emergency reserve from our everyday checking account, it tends to stay built up a little bit more, and there's a little bit more of a hurdle because it takes maybe a day or two to transfer it back to your checking account, and that's enough of a hurdle that it typically tends to stay built up for our clients. So we like that kind of behavioral finance strategy with that, okay? So the next one, I'm actually going to jump over to these two, and I'll come back to the second bucket, okay? So the next options that we want savings in are what we call our retirement accounts. So we're going to have either pre-tax or we're going to have Roth options, okay? So I like to call this domain over here, this is retirement land. Retirement land. So in retirement land over here, these are accounts that we want to put money away and we're not going to touch those until retirement, right? And so really in retirement land, we have the option typically, whether through it's your, you might have, your 401k here as an option to put pre-tax money away. You might have a Roth 401k. That's you can put money into your 401k on a Roth basis, or you can even do what's called a Roth IRA if you're under the income limits. And if you're over the income limits, there may still be ways that we can get money into a Roth IRA through what's called the backdoor Roth IRA strategy. And so check out my other video on that if you haven't been familiar with what that is and how that works. But nonetheless, there's also a whole bunch of different options. 401k is just for a for-profit entity. You might have a 403b or a TSP if you're working at the VA. All of those can fall into one of these two categories, okay? So what does that actually mean, pre-tax versus Roth, right? So I like to think of it on a timeline, okay? So if we're looking at a timeline, let's just break it into 3 steps on the timeline. When we put the money in, what happens? When it grows, what happens? And when we take it out, what happens, okay? So let's start with pre-tax, okay? So you take pre-tax and you put the money into the account, you get tax savings today. So if you made $100,000 in a given year and you decide to put $10,000 into your pre-tax retirement option that you have, you only have to report to the IRS that you made $90,000 that year, right? Because $10,000 of that went into your pre-tax account. So if you're effectively getting taxed maybe 30% on that money, that's like $3,000 of tax savings, in that given year. So we're saving money up front here. And then that money, we can invest that and get that in stocks and bonds and grow over time. But you don't have to pay taxes on that every year. So as it grows, it can compound on itself. It was called tax deferred growth. So unlike your high yield savings account over here, where you get a bill every year, you have to pay taxes on whatever you earn in that high yield savings account. This one actually just stays all bundled in there, and it just keeps growing over time, right? And then when you take it out, we can't take it out until 59 and a half years old. And then if we wait until after that, there's no penalty on it. But when you take any dollar out of that account, the pre-tax account, that's going to be 100% taxable to you as if you earned it in that year that you pull it out, right? So that's a big thing to note. So if you pull out $100,000 from your pre-tax account in the future, it's going to show as if you made $100,000 in that given year, right? So that's a big thing to be thinking about on pre-tax. So now let's run through the same timeline with Roth, okay? So let's say you put $10,000 to your Roth 401k option through your work. You still make the same $100,000 in that given year. Well, if you put it in a Roth, you don't get any tax savings today because you still have to report that you made $100,000 to the IRS that year. So there's no tax savings here. But when it grows, you get that same tax deferred growth that you got in pre-tax. So you don't have to pay taxes on it year after year like you have to in the high yield savings account. So huge, because we love to see that grow and compound on itself, right? But then we still can't take out any of the growth until 59 and a half. But the nice thing with the Roth is actually you can take that money, that whatever you put into it as a contribution, you can take out without paying penalty or taxes on it. Because guess what? You already paid taxes on that. So it also adds another layer of flexibility for you if you do need to. But obviously we like to leave money in retirement land for you. But it's a nice, life happens if we need to readjust or potentially access some of those funds before 59 and a half, a lot easier with a Roth, okay? But any dollar, if you wait until after 59 and a half, every dollar in that account, that money that you put into it, and all the growth on that is all completely tax-free to you. So this can become, more of like a gold mine in the future from a tax standpoint because you don't owe the government anything at that point, right? And so we love to see that as well. So, really when we're looking at it, which one is better or worse? I think they both have their pros and cons, but really it's really looking at, where do we think taxes are going to be going in the future? Because obviously, if we think that taxes are going to be going down, or we think that we're going to be in a lower tax bracket in the future when we're pulling the money out, pre-tax is the way to go, right? But if we think the tax rates are going up in the future, or we think that we're going to be in a higher tax bracket in the future, Roth is the way to go, right? And so, where do you think tax rates are going in the future? I think there's a lot of data suggesting that tax rates are going up in the future, so that's why I think Roth has become most popular, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that pre-tax is completely outdated either, right? Because a lot of times some employers too, they only match you sometimes if you're on your pre-tax contribution. So we don't want to miss out on that too. So we got to look at your specific situation and make sure that, sometimes not just going all one way or the other is not always the answer, but oftentimes if they're matching you and they're getting that, I think the Roth could be a great option. But it's kind of nice to diversify across that because we don't know what the government may target in the future, right? And so having a little bit of both definitely helps, okay? Now, the last thing, so what we're going to do, we want to make sure we have an emergency reserve. We got to fill out, we like to usually maximize what we can do in retirement land through your employer and everything. Outside of, what we call the 457 plans, those are a little bit wonky, which we did another video on that if you haven't checked that out. But then we got to have money to put elsewhere, right? We're going to usually we're going to have a set number that we want our clients to be saving each year. And so it's not just trying to save everything that you could possibly save. It's, what is your number? And oftentimes that number is higher than what you can put into your retirement land accounts, right? And so where does that money go next? And so that money goes into what we call a taxable account. Okay, so that money goes into a taxable account. So the same reason that you would want to keep money in your high yield savings account instead of your checking account is the same reason that you would want to keep money in the taxable account instead of the high yield savings account. Because this is an account that we're going to actually invest, and we'll talk about what we're actually investing in, but we want to invest in stocks and bonds and get this money growing, hopefully more than our high yield savings account over the long term, right? So when we're looking at this from a retirement standpoint, this is something that you put the money in, you don't get any tax breaks, when it's growing. As it grows, every year you got to pay taxes, just like your high yield savings account. You got to pay taxes as it grows, and you make changes to that. And then when you take it out, obviously you got to pay taxes on whatever growth happens in the account. You never have to pay double taxes, right? But whatever grows in the account, you got to pay taxes on that growth. Okay. But it's really nice because you have full flexibility. So we can earmark, a bucket for retirement directly in this taxable account, and we can earmark it for retirement, and we usually will denote funds going to that on a regular basis to hit kind of our annual goal that we have for our clients, right? But that means that it's not tied up in retirement land for you. So if you need to repurpose those dollars for something else, hopefully we can keep that in retirement, in that retirement focus, so that we can use those funds for the long term. But again, life happens, guys, and sometimes we need to repurpose funds. And so the more flexible your financial plan can be, the more successful we see them being over the long term. So having the additional retirement savings in your taxable account is often great. But oftentimes we're going to have other goals that come up that, hey, we know how much we need to be saving for retirement, but maybe we have other attack goals that we want to be saving for. So, we could oftentimes set up different kids accounts. Maybe we need to do kids savings in here, and we can set up some savings for, in conjunction with maybe a 529 plan, but this is going to give a lot more flexibility for you, maybe less tax advantages, but more flexibility. Maybe that's a future house purchase that we want to buy, or maybe we want to get as an investment property for us in the future. But usually anything that is past like 2 or 3 years out, we're going to want to see that in a taxable investment account, because we're hopeful that we can get hopefully more of a return than in our high yield savings account. But if it's less than that probably a couple year time frame, probably keeping it in a high yield savings account is going to be your best bet, because as we'll talk about in the next lesson here, we're going to really want to look at how do we want to be managing the underlying investments that we're investing in, and do we want to be more conservative, more risky, and how does that relate to the time frame of when we're going to need the funds in our plan. So but this is kind of a general scope that really trying to simplify it all, because all of your different accounts are going to fall into one of these 4 buckets. And so It's making sure that when we're looking at your situation, are we kind of dry in one area that maybe we need to, spread the wealth out a little bit? A lot of people maybe have a lot of money in their pre-tax account. Maybe we can start doing some Roth contributions, or maybe we have all Roth contributions, but maybe we're missing out on a match through the pre-tax, or not contributing anything to the taxable, and we have all of our future savings in retirement land that could, is more difficult to get access to, right? So that's how I want you guys to be thinking about when we're setting up these accounts. How are we diversifying from a tax standpoint with the types of accounts? So thanks so much for spending some time with me on this, and looking forward to seeing you in part 2.